If there's anything I love, it's animation and animation history, specifically the rubber hose era of the 20s and 30s. Get me talking about different animation techniques and you likely won't get me to stop. One of my favorite techniques to talk about is rotoscoping. But what is rotoscoping and why is it important to animation? To understand that, let's delve into the origin and development of this technique. If I were to ask you to think of any animator from the last century or so, your mind would probably jump immediately to Walt Disney, right? Well, it's true that Walt did a lot of great things, but that notoriety is a double-edged sword. His many accomplishments tend to overshadow anything other animators have done to improve animation. That aside, let's talk about the man who developed the rotoscoping technique, Max Fleischer. You may be familiar with his characters Betty Boop and Popeye the Sailor Man. In fact, while Fleischer's name might not be as well known as Disney's, the unique style of his company's animations may seem familiar as it has directly inspired modern takes on rubber hose animation in video games like Bendy and the Ink Machine and Cuphead. Max Fleischer invented the rotoscoping technique in 1915 to help animate his Out of the Inkwell series. Max had his brother Dave Fleischer perform on camera in a clown costume. He then took this footage and traced it frame by frame to create an extremely fluid and realistic animation of his character, Coco the Clown. Originally, he thought this process would streamline the already arduous task of animation. However, this didn't turn out to be true. Because of the nature of this technique, mistracing a frame meant the animation might come out crooked or wobbly, which meant more time would need to be spent on an animation to fix any small errors. Fleischer ended up putting rotoscoping away in 1924, but in 1930 he turned to more innovative ways to utilize the technique. Enter Cab Calloway. Calloway was a jazz singer, dancer, and band leader whose popularity peaked in the 1930s and 40s. His music and dancing were utilized in a few animated shorts produced by Fleischer Studios, most notably Minnie the Moocher in 1932, and both Snow White and The Man of the Mountain in 1933. These examples of rotoscoping were completely different from Fleischer's previous shorts. Instead of strictly adhering to Cab's body structure, Fleischer focused more on the movements and timing of the dancing, morphing the actual animation into different, stylized shapes and creatures.
She was the roughest, toughest frail, but Minnie had a heart as big as a whale. Hidey, 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 hide. Hidey, 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 hide. Whoa.
Speaking of Snow White, as well as bringing back the topic of Disney, the Walt Disney Studio also used rotoscoping in a lot of its feature films. Take this scene from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Do you notice how realistically proportioned Snow White is compared to Doc? That's because Snow's movements are directly rotoscoped, while the dwarves' movements are merely referenced. Because they're shorter and more stylized than Snow White herself, directly tracing footage of the actors who modeled the dwarves wouldn't look quite right. The same goes for the fairy from Pinocchio. Her rotoscoping is incredibly detailed and realistic, while the rotoscoping for Jiminy Cricket is stylized and cartoony. Disney has used rotoscoping in plenty more movies like Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella, The Little Mermaid, and Aladdin. And you can see they've committed more fully to stylization. The characters are more well integrated into their environment instead of looking oddly realistic and out of place. A lot of the footage the animators used as reference for these movies has been garnering more and more attention online as animators and cartoon enthusiasts alike gather to appreciate these rare clips. Rotoscoping isn't used solely for movies, though. Arguably one of the most famous examples of rotoscoping outside of the context of movies is a-ha's Take On Me music video. One of my favorite examples of interesting rotoscoping is the music video for the song Fell in Love with a Girl by the White Stripes. This music video is so unique and cool that I can't help but imagine how much it would boggle the minds of animators from the 20s. Something not to be confused with rotoscoping is mocapping, or motion capturing. This technique is used for a similar reason to rotoscoping in that it is intended to capture realistic movement, but is counted as an entirely different thing due to its strong ties with CGI and digital media. Well-known media using motion capture include the Polar Express, the Hulk's animations in Marvel movies, and the movie which revolutionized the technique, Avatar. As for why rotoscoping is important, well, we wouldn't have any of these movies, music videos, or video games without this technique, now would we? But in all seriousness, without Max Fleischer and rotoscoping, it may have taken longer or even been impossible to develop animation and gain a more acute knowledge of the human body the way we have today. We certainly wouldn't have been able to develop motion capture without rotoscoping, and animated movies as we know it would be vastly different than what we have today. It's subjects like these that make me so appreciative of early animators like Fleischer. The development of animation is very important to me, as one of my main passions is creating things that people will enjoy and remember, and I want to be able to inspire more people to learn about animation history and techniques through my own excitement. After all, remembering early animators and cartoons will help them live on in the public's consciousness, not only because of their cultural impact, but also because they're just really cool. Anyways, learning is really fun, and the internet makes it easier than ever to access information like this. So why not spend some time appreciating rotoscoping? I know I will.